You are not lacking discipline. You are just destroying it every day without even realizing it. Most people think they fail because they lack motivation. But the truth is, motivation was never the problem. The problem is, you are believing the wrong things. Very small mistakes. Very reasonable. Very normal. So normal that you never question them. Like a house, it doesn't collapse because of one big impact, but because of small cracks spreading from within. Your discipline is the same. It doesn't disappear in a day. It gets worn down little by the way you think. And the most dangerous part is, you still think you're doing it right. Today, I will show you 5 silent mistakes that are destroying your discipline, things that, if you don't recognize them, you will repeat for the rest of your life. Let's find out what the first mistake is. First mistake, you wait for motivation and then act. There's a story I heard a long time ago. A farmer stands in the middle of his field. He looks up at the sky, waiting for rain. He says, "When it rains, I will start planting seeds." But that day never comes, and he keeps waiting. Day after day, the land is still there. The seeds are still there, but the harvest never begins. Sounds unreasonable, right? But I want you to stop and ask yourself a simple question. How many rains have you waited for in your life? You say, "When I feel motivated, I'll start. When I feel better, I'll do it. When I'm ready, I'll change." But when is ready? I have met many people who believe this. They believe action must follow emotion, that they need something inside, a push, a source of energy, to begin. But that is one of the most dangerous silent mistakes. Because if you only act when you feel like it, you will never go far enough to change your life. Emotion is the most unstable thing you have. Some days you are full of energy. Some days you don't want to do anything. Some days you believe in yourself. Some days you doubt everything. If you put your life in the hands of emotion, your life will go up and down like the weather. And you will call it lack of discipline. But in reality, you are just handing control to something that is never stable. I remember a man I once met, a normal office worker. He always said he wanted to change his life, wanted to read more, wanted to improve himself, wanted to earn extra income. But every evening when he got home, he would say, "I'm too tired today, tomorrow." And tomorrow repeated exactly like today. Not because he didn't understand, not because he didn't want to, but because he was waiting for the right feeling to do the right thing. And that is the trap. You don't need motivation to start. You need to start to create motivation. That is the difference very few people understand. Discipline is not about feeling strong and then acting. Discipline is about acting even when you feel nothing. It's when you still work even without inspiration, still move forward even when unsure, still keep your promise to yourself even when no one is watching. I'm not saying it's easy. In fact, it's very hard, because every time you do it, you go against your instincts. You reject comfort. You reject what is easy. You choose what is right instead of what feels good. And that is where discipline is built. Not on the days you feel motivated, but on the days you don't and still do it. Imagine someone who exercises. If he only works out when he feels like it, he will never get consistent results. But if he trains every day, whether he wants to or not, whether he is tired or not, then over time, his body changes. Not because of emotion, but because of repetition. Discipline is the same. It does not come from a burst moment. It comes from small actions, repeated when you don't feel like it. And the interesting thing is, when you start acting, emotion will follow. You don't need to wait for motivation. You create it through action. You don't need to wait for clarity. You create it by starting. You don't need to wait for the right time. You create that moment with your decision. That is the reversal very few people realize. They wait to feel good, then act, while disciplined people act first, then feel good. And over time, that difference becomes a very large gap. One person keeps waiting. One person keeps doing. One person keeps thinking. One person keeps moving forward. And after a few years, they live completely different lives. I want you to remember this. If you keep waiting for emotion, you will keep standing still. But if you learn to act despite emotion, you will start to control your life. Not immediately, but certainly. And that is where real discipline begins. Not from a feeling, but from a decision, a very simple, but very powerful decision. Whether I feel like it or not, I will still do it. When you can say that and follow it, you have stepped out of the first mistake. But this is only the surface. Because even when you no longer wait for motivation, there is still another mistake, more subtle, that keeps you standing still without realizing it. Second mistake. You set goals too big to avoid small steps. I want you to imagine something. A person stands at the foot of a very tall mountain. He looks at the top and says, "One day, I will reach that." Sounds great. Sounds inspiring. But then he stands there, doesn't move, doesn't prepare, doesn't start, just stands and looks. And every day passes, he keeps saying the same thing. One day, I have met many people like that. They don't lack dreams. They don't lack ambition. In fact, they have too much. They want to change their life, want to earn more money, want to become the best version of themselves. But they don't do the only thing that can get them there. They don't start with small steps. You might think the problem is they are not determined enough. But no, the real problem is they are using big goals as a way to delay. This is a very subtle mistake, because on the surface, it looks like ambition, but inside, it is avoidance. When you set a goal that is too big, too far, too difficult, you unintentionally create a huge gap between where you are and where you want to be, and that gap paralyzes you. You don't know where to start. You don't know what the first step is. You don't know if you are capable. And instead of doing one small thing, you do nothing. I remember a student I once talked to. He said to me, "I want to be successful. I want a high income. I want to change my family's life. Those are beautiful goals." But when I asked him, "What did you do today to get closer to that?" he was silent. Not because he didn't want to answer, but because he had no answer, because in his mind, everything was in the future. And that is the problem. Discipline does not live in the future. It lives in small actions right now. You don't build a better life with big ideas. You build it with small actions repeated every day. But most people don't like that. They want a big leap. They want fast results. They want the feeling of a breakthrough, but discipline does not work that way. It works like an account. Every small action you take is a deposit. One page you read, 1 hour you focus, one time you keep your promise to yourself. Nothing too impressive, nothing too big, but over time it accumulates. And one day you look back and realize how far you've come. Meanwhile, those who keep waiting for a big leap are still in the same place because they never started. I'm not saying you shouldn't have big goals. You should. But the mistake is you only look at the mountaintop and ignore the first step. You are obsessed with results, but don't respect the process. You want to become disciplined, but you are not willing to do small things consistently. And that is why you feel like you are not progressing. Not because you are not trying, but because you are trying the wrong way. You are skipping necessary steps. You are looking for shortcuts. You are waiting for something big to happen to change everything. But life does not change that way. It changes little by little. Look at a normal working person. An employee who spends 1 extra hour every day learning, just 1 hour. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. But after 1 year, that is over 300 hours. After 3 years, that is nearly 1,000 hours. What do you think will happen to that person? They don't need a big leap. They have built a foundation, and that foundation becomes an advantage. That is how discipline works. Silently, slowly, but surely. And the interesting thing is, when you start with small steps, you reduce pressure. You no longer feel overwhelmed. You no longer feel not enough. You just need to do one thing, today, right now. And when you do that, you create movement. And that movement leads to motivation. This is what many people don't understand. They think motivation comes first. But actually, small action is what creates it. So the question is not, how big is your goal? But what did you do today, even just one small step? If the answer is nothing, then the problem is not that your goal is too small. The problem is, you are trapped in a very dangerous illusion. That thinking big is enough, but it is not. You must act small. Repeat, not skip. That is the only path. And when you begin to understand that, you escape the second mistake. You are no longer obsessed with the peak. You focus on each step. But even when you have started with small steps, there is still something else deeper that causes many people to stop halfway. Not because they don't want to continue, but because they don't have what keeps them going. And that is the next mistake, third mistake. You don't have a system, you only have temporary willpower. I want you to imagine a boat drifting on the ocean. No compass, no map, no clear direction. But the person on the boat says, "I will reach the destination because I am very determined." It sounds strong, but you already know what will happen. He may row very hard for one day. He may put in a lot of effort for a week, but without direction, all that effort is just going in circles. And that is exactly what is happening to many people. They don't lack willpower. They don't lack determination. In fact, there are days they do very well. They wake up early. They focus. They work hard. But then the next day, everything disappears. Not because they changed their goals, but because they are missing something more important than motivation. They don't have a system. This is a very hard mistake to recognize. Because when you have a good day, you think, I'm on the right track. But one good day does not create a good life. Repetition does, and repetition does not come from emotion. It comes from a system. I once met an entrepreneur, someone you could call very disciplined. But the interesting thing is, he didn't talk about motivation. He didn't talk about willpower. He talked about habits. Every day he wakes up at the same time. Every day he starts his work in the same sequence. No thinking, no inspiration needed. No arguing with himself, just doing. I asked him, what helps you maintain that for so long? He gave a very simple answer. I don't let myself decide every day. That is the difference. When you don't have a system, every day is a battle. You have to decide, should I do it today? When should I do it? How long should I do it? And every decision consumes energy. Every time you have to convince yourself, you get weaker. And at some point you will lose. Not because you are weak, but because you are playing the wrong game. Discipline is not about winning every day. Discipline is about not having to fight every day. That is where systems come in. A system removes hesitation. A system turns action into default. A system keeps you moving forward, even when you don't feel like it. Look at a simple example. Someone says they want to read books. If they rely only on willpower, they will read when they feel like it. But if they have a system, for example, every night, after dinner, read 10 pages. No thinking, no delaying, no negotiating. Then what happens? It becomes part of life. Not a task, not a choice, but a habit. And when that happens, discipline is no longer a burden. It becomes identity. This is what many people misunderstand. They think disciplined people are always strong. But in reality, disciplined people build environments and systems so they don't have to be strong all the time. They don't rely on emotion. They don't rely on willpower. They rely on structure. And that structure keeps them stable. If you look back at your life, you will see this clearly. The things you do well are usually the things you do repeatedly. Not because you are always motivated, but because you are used to them. Meanwhile, the things you want to do but don't are usually the things without a system. They exist in your mind, but not in your schedule. And anything that has no place in your daily life will never become a result. That is the truth. You may want to change. You may understand a lot. But if you don't build a system, you will always restart, again and again. And every time you do that, your belief in yourself decreases a little, until you start believing, I'm not a disciplined person, but that is not true. The truth is, you have not built the right structure to support yourself. You are trying to use willpower to do what a system should do, and that is a battle you cannot win long term. I want you to remember this. You don't need to become stronger. You need to become smarter in how you design your life. You don't need more motivation. You need fewer choices. You don't need to push yourself harder. You need to create a path that you simply follow. When you do that, everything changes. You don't restart anymore. You continue. You don't depend on emotion anymore. You depend on structure. You don't fight every day. You move forward consistently. And that is when real discipline appears. Quiet, not dramatic, but very strong. But even when you already have a system, there is still another mistake more subtle that can destroy everything you are building. A mistake not in your actions, but in how you see yourself. And that is the next mistake, fourth mistake. You compare yourself and lose yourself. I want you to imagine a race. Not a normal race, but a race where each person runs on a different path. One runs on flat ground. One runs uphill. One runs against the wind. One runs with better shoes. But the strange thing is, they all look at each other. They don't look at their own path. They don't look at their own steps. They look at others and ask, why are they faster than me? And from that moment, they begin to lose direction. This is exactly what happens when you compare yourself. On the surface, it seems harmless. Even you may think it gives you motivation. You see others succeed and you say, I want that too. but very quickly it changes. You no longer look to learn. You start looking to judge. You measure yourself by someone else's life. And that is where everything starts to go wrong. I have seen this too many times. A person starts their journey very focused, very clear. They know what they want. They know what they need to do. But then they look sideways. They see someone moving faster. They see someone achieving bigger results. And immediately they begin to doubt themselves. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not meant for this path. And from there, their discipline begins to shake. Not because they lost ability, but because they lost belief. You have to understand this. Discipline is not just action. It is also stability and perception. If you constantly change direction just because others are going a different way, you will never go far enough to see results. You will always stay at the beginning. Comparison doesn't just take your focus. It takes your consistency. You start changing plans. You start trying new things. You start abandoning what you began, not because it doesn't work, but because you are not patient enough to see it work. I remember a young man, he started learning a new skill. In the first few months, he improved very well, slow but steady. But then he saw someone else who had been doing it longer and was better. And instead of continuing, he stopped. He said, "I will never reach that level." But he forgot one simple thing. That person had been doing it much longer than him. You cannot compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. But that is what most people are doing. And when you do that, you put yourself in a game you cannot win, because there will always be someone better than you. Always someone faster. Always someone achieving more. If you use them as your measurement, you will always feel not enough. And when you feel not enough, you won't act with confidence. You will hesitate. You will delay. You will self-sabotage before you even have the chance to go far. This is what very few people realize. Comparison does not make you better. It makes you lose your identity. You start chasing other people's standards. You start living by other people's definition of success. And in that process, you forget who you are. You forget your strengths. You forget your path. And when you lose that, your discipline has no foundation, because you no longer know what you are building. I want you to look back. The moments when you felt most disciplined were not when you looked at others, but when you focused on yourself, when you knew what you were doing, when you knew why you were doing it, when you moved forward step by step without distraction. That is the state you need to return to, not to become better than others, but to become consistent with yourself. Discipline is not a race. It is a process of building, and you cannot build if you keep tearing down to start again. You must choose a direction and walk long enough for it to matter. You must trust your process even when you don't see results yet. That is hard, but it is necessary, because if you don't, you will always be pulled away from your path by things that don't belong to you. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at others. You can learn from them. You can get inspired by them, but don't use them to judge yourself. Use them as examples, not as standards. Your standard must come from within, from what you know is right, from what you commit to yourself. When you do that, you take back control. You are no longer shaken. You are no longer pulled away. You stand firm. And when you stand firm, your discipline becomes stable. Not because you are stronger, but because you are clearer. But even when you no longer compare yourself, there is still a deeper mistake, more dangerous. A mistake that does not come from the outside world, but from within you. A mistake you repeat every day without realizing it. And if you don't face it, no system, no goal can save you. And that is the final mistake. Fifth mistake, you lie to yourself every day. I want you to try something, not with me, but with yourself. Pause for a moment and ask a very simple question. When was the last time you were completely honest with yourself? Not honest with others, not with friends or family, but with yourself. Because if you look deep enough, you will realize something very hard to accept. Most of what is holding you back is not your circumstances. It is the stories you tell yourself, stories that sound reasonable, convincing, easy to believe. I'm tired today. It's okay to rest. I'm not ready yet. I'll do it later. This isn't the right time. I'll wait for a better one. I've tried enough already. They sound normal. You might even hear them every day from your own voice in your head. But the problem is not the words. It is that you believe them. This is the most dangerous mistake, because when you lie to others, they can catch it. But when you lie to yourself, no one is there to correct you. You become the storyteller and the one who believes the story. And over time, You can no longer tell the difference between truth and justification. I once met a man, a very intelligent one. He knew what he needed to do. He understood his problems clearly. He even had a plan. But every time it was time to act, he found a reason not to. Not a weak reason, a very reasonable one. This project isn't perfect yet. I need more preparation. I don't want to rush. And because of that, he delayed. Not for a day, not for a week, but for months, even years. And the scary part is, he didn't think he was wrong. He thought he was being careful, thinking thoroughly, doing the right thing. That is how self-deception works. It doesn't appear as a mistake. It appears as a reasonable choice. And because of that, you don't fight it. You defend it. You justify it. You even build a belief system to maintain it. And in the process, your discipline is destroyed from within. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you don't accept the truth about what you're doing. You say you want to change, but your actions say otherwise. You say you are serious, but you keep breaking promises to yourself. You say you will start, but you always find a reason to delay. And every time you do that, your trust in yourself decreases a little, until you no longer believe your own words. That is the real consequence. Not that you fail to reach your goals, but that you lose trust in yourself. And when that happens, everything becomes much harder. Because discipline does not start with action. It starts with honesty. You must look at your life without editing, without decorating, without justifying. You must be able to say, this is where I am, not better, not worse, just the truth. That is not easy, because the truth is often uncomfortable. It doesn't sound nice. It doesn't make you feel good, but it is the only starting point. Because if you don't face the truth, you cannot change it. You can learn more. You can listen more. You can understand more. But if you keep lying to yourself, nothing changes. I want you to remember this. You don't fail because you lack ability. You fail because you are not honest with yourself long enough. You don't lack time. You lack clarity. You don't lack opportunity. You lack the courage to face the truth. But when you do, everything changes. You no longer need to guess. You no longer need to wonder. You know exactly what needs to be done. And when you know, you can act. Not because you are motivated, not because you feel ready, but because you are no longer avoiding. That is the turning point. That is the moment real discipline begins. Not from a plan, not from a system, but from a very simple yet very powerful decision. No more lying. When you can say that and live by it, you don't just change your actions. You change how you see yourself. And when that changes, your life has no choice but to change with it. But remember, understanding these mistakes is not the end. It is only the beginning, because awareness is not enough. You must choose what you will do with that truth. Will you continue as before, or will you change? That is a question only you can answer. And that is also where everything truly begins. I want you to pause once more, not to learn more, but to look back. You have just gone through 5 mistakes. Not big mistakes, not obvious things, but very small ones, very reasonable ones, repeated every day. You wait for motivation. You set big goals but don't take small actions. You rely on willpower without a system. You compare and lose direction. And finally, you lie to yourself. None of these sound too serious. And that is exactly why they are dangerous. Because you can live with them for years without realizing that they are silently destroying your discipline. And when discipline is destroyed, everything else begins to collapse. Not immediately, but inevitably. But here's the most important thing I want you to take away. You don't need to become a completely new person. You just need to stop doing the things that are destroying you. Sometimes change does not come from doing more. It comes from stopping. Stop waiting. Stop justifying. Stop avoiding the truth. And when you do that, you don't just rebuild discipline. You rebuild yourself. Because when your thinking changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Now, I want to ask you one question. Out of these 5 mistakes, which one do you see yourself repeating the most? Write it down in the comments. Not to prove anything to others, but to start facing yourself. If this video made you think, press like. If you want to rebuild your discipline, subscribe and follow the channel. And if you know someone who is stuck, share this video with them. Because sometimes one truth at the right time can change an entire life. Remember this, discipline is not something you have, it is something you build every day with small choices. And finally, I truly appreciate you for staying until the end of this video.